И немного слайдов от Дмитрия. Столько народу пришло. Это... И всем интересен фронтенд, что ли, да? Немного знакомых из, да, вот там кто-то говорит, что на автопати пришел. Ну, до автопати, рановато, да, для автопати. Оно вечером будет, это автопати. Так, Дима готов?
Так. Всем привет. Пустых слов Саша не сказал, их скажу я. Да, сегодня Rolling Scopes, и у нас два официальных хэштега. Это rsconf и наш классический Rolling Scopes. Сегодня 20-й ивент в серии Rolling Scopes, то есть до этого было 14 митапов, 5 воркшопов, и мы рады, что мы смогли дорасти до конференции. Тут есть участники первого или второго митапа? Ну, в принципе, кто-то еще жив. Я посмотрел, что у нас было на первом митапе. В принципе, все актуально. Можно хоть завтра повторять. Тот же Angular, Ember, веб-компоненты. Да. Многим нравится наш логотип, кому-то не нравится. А это его решил, откопал недавно. Прообраз, откуда все начиналось. И наши колеса HTML, CSS, JS и Node. Ну а сейчас, в принципе, о конференции, к которой мы долго готовились, которая заняла нас много сил, но мы рады, что она состоялась. У нашей конференции есть Code of Conduct, который размещен на сайте. Если кратко, никакого секса, наркотиков, да, и рок-н-ролла, да. Да, и все встали и ушли, как сказал. Сюда, можно уходить. Еще мы любим HTML, и надеюсь, что вы тоже любите HTML. Есть куча замечательных тегов, есть не очень замечательных, но они есть. И на ваших бейджах сзади есть вот здесь красная буква, но у вас она синяя. Да, что с этой буквой можно сделать? Ну вот здесь плохо видно, да, но тут мы стоим, лучше видно вот здесь, только здесь выложено неправильно. Тут не table, а какой-то елбат. Ну, на предыдущей фотографии было неплохо, то есть тут table все-таки. Да, лифт фотографировал, да. И лифт у него, да, проблемы. И что? Нашли буквы, находите другие буквы, да, можете сейчас уже спросить, кто сидит с вами рядом или с кем вы будете пить кофе. С кем, то есть, отличная способность подойти к кому-то и сказать: «О, какая у тебя хорошая буква». Пошли сфоткаемся. Да. Но никакого секса и наркотиков. Идем просто фотографироваться. Далее, в принципе, желательно, чтобы вы эту фотографию запостили в Twitter, Facebook или вообще куда можно запостить с тегами. Ну и плюс будут участвовать, в принципе, фотографии, которые сфотографирует наш фотограф там у стены, которая через стену. То есть фотостена, которая находится за вот этой реальной стеной. Хэштег rsconf. Но теги минимум 2 символа, а лучше 3. Или какой-нибудь black quote сразу. Так, приз. Мы надеемся, что мы не умрем. Что у нас будет возможность провести следующую конференцию. И мы из тех фотографий, которые будут запаблишены, выберем одну или несколько. И все участники, которые будут на этом снимке, например, там Black Watts, собрали, сфоткались и получили все билеты. Может быть, еще что-нибудь, кроме билетов. Ну, конечно, это будет ни хрена не объективно, потому что мы победителей будем определять сами. Мы пока не придумали механизм, мы не знаем, сколько человек сфотографируется. Возможно, будет какое-то зрительское голосование. Мне интересно, вот есть верхняя строчка X, Q, G и W. Тут есть кто-нибудь с этими буквами? Вот, посмотрите, это эти буквы в единственном экземпляре. То есть еще раз поднимите руки. Вот. То есть да, вот если парень G поднимает, то больше нет G. И вот смотрите дальше, VH. Эти буквы всего в 3 экземплярах. То есть div так просто не соберешь у нас на конференции. А где кстати, V? Что? Div вообще... А нет, один человек есть. Он будет очень популярен, наверное, сегодня. Итого, что минимум надо сделать сегодня? Это послушать доклады, поесть, поучаствовать в CSS-квизе, который будет завершать нашу конференцию, да, попробовать выиграть билеты на следующую конфу. Есть у нас фотозона, еще будет фотобокс, у нас будет вечером пиво и автопати. Ну, это все, что я вспомнил пока что. Благодарности. То есть обычно какие-то благодарности говорят в конце. Но я рассматриваю эти благодарности не как благодарности за эту конференцию, а как благодарности за все ивенты, которые мы проводили уже последние 1,5 года, то есть этих 19 ивентов. И хочу сказать спасибо ИПАМу, который помогает продвигать комьюнити и поддерживать обучение. Хочу сказать спасибо Аймагуру, который всегда нас гостеприимно встречает и где мы можем уютно проводить наши митапы. Спасибо Насте, которая помогала разгребать документацию. Спасибо Юле, которая не спала, наверное, уже неделю, чтобы заключить все договора и их оплатить, которых было бесконечно много. Также Амине, Юле, Сергею, и Николаю и всех, кого мы не успели вспомнить, но которые сделали много для того, чтобы комьюнити жило, развивалось, ну еще что-нибудь. Кроме этого, комьюнити — это вы, это не только мы, это и вы. И поэтому, если у вас есть какие-то предложения, вы хотите выступить с докладом, послушать просто какую-то тему, пишите к нам на почту. То есть послушать — это значит поделиться, не только поделиться своими знаниями, их меньше у вас не станет, но у вас появится какой-то опыт презентации своих идей, который обязательно, я считаю, должен быть у каждого разработчика для того, чтобы отстаивать свои технические решения или тот продукт, который он делает перед другими разработчиками или какими-то бизнес-people. И вопрос, который задают, это самый часто задаваемый вопрос за все время Rolling Scopes. Его задавали вчера парень, наверное, застеснялся, потому что я только сделал этот слайд, он подошел и опять спросил этот вопрос. Я смеялся, и он был сконфужен. Я прошу у него прощения. Это вопрос, где здесь туалет? Туалет в IBB находится вот за эту стенку и вниз по лестнице. И сегодня конференция не закончится. Мы не смогли все вместить вот в эти 2 дня, вчера и сегодня. И поэтому доклад Виталия Фридмана будет в четверг. Регистрация бесплатна не только для тех, у кого есть билеты, но и вообще можете звать своих друзей, знакомых и так далее. Вот. Так, let's roll. И сейчас должен быть доклад Андрея Листочкина, но нам из-за технических проблем пришлось сейчас поставить другой доклад. К сожалению, Hakon Wium Lie не смог приехать, он успел долететь до Риги, и после этого, то есть он летел в Ригу, он прилетел, но рейс задержали, и он не успел на другой рейс из Риги в Минск. А в то время, когда он сегодня должен выступать, он уже будет чекиниться на рейс из Риги назад. То есть он провел ночь в аэропорту, и свой доклад он прочитает сейчас первым и прочитает его по скайпу. За что я приношу извинения тем, кто хотел его увидеть лично, но мы здесь ничего не можем сделать. Да, так что Рижский аэропорт сейчас будет на связи. Ну все, Саша. Спасибо.
Спасибо Диме. Hakon Wium Lie. Есть легендарные фигуры во фронтенде. Большинство из нас, я уверен, все из нас пришли во фронтенд, когда там уже был CSS, но не Hakon. Потому что он стоял у истоков, это человек, который придумал CSS. Он был одним из тех, кто редактировал первоначальный стандарт. CSS, ACID 2, член партии пиратов, бизнесмен, просто классный человек и джентльмен, напрямую из Риги, Hakon Wium Lie. Okay, Hakon, can you hear us? I guess not. Hakon? Can you hear us? Well, barely. Could you tune it up a little? Кроме того, что Hakon, к сожалению, не попал лично сюда, еще очень жаль, что не попал в оперу, белорусскую оперу, куда он взял билеты на вчерашний день.
Yes, I hear you.
Oh. Okay, so we hear you loud and clear. You may start.
Can you see me?
Yeah.
Can you hear
perfectly.
me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good morning. I'm very happy to be with you, although only virtually. I was on my way to Minsk yesterday, and I arrived from Oslo, and the plane was a little delayed due to de-icing, which is generally a good idea. But it made me lose my connection here in Riga, so I'm stuck in a hotel room in Riga while you're there in Minsk. I wish I could be with you. Thanks for the applause. It's good for me to see that you can actually hear and understand what I'm saying. And I'm also very happy to be using technology here. I think we have to rely on communications technology increasingly, and we need to be able to convey not just speaks and pictures and video, but also emotions and applause. And maybe I'll even share a joke today. So I'll be following you and see if you laugh. You need to laugh in the right places. Is that okay? Okay, very good. Great. So now I'm going to switch to my slides to see if I can get them across. Now you see my slides, I think. Is that right? Yeah. Very good. Perfect. So the topic for my talk is why CSS was invented. CSS has been an important part of my life for the last 20 years. In October last year, it was 20 years since I first proposed CSS as a way of displaying web pages. And I will take you back to where this was started in order to understand some of the thinking. That's a bit of history, but I still think it's relevant to understand how to use CSS today. And I will also speak a little bit about where I think CSS should and will be going. I know there's a lot of CSS experts in the room, and I see that you will even have a CSS quiz later today. I'm very happy to not be part of that quiz, because I'm sure there's people in the room who knows a lot more about CSS than I do. That's a joke. Thank you. So I'm taking you back to CERN, which is a physics laboratory in Switzerland. It's actually on the border between France and Switzerland, where you find the world's biggest machine. It's an incredible machine, and it's buried under the ground, and you can see the scale of it. This is one of the detectors underneath, and the scale of this you can see with the man standing at the bottom in the middle here. He is showing the scale of this incredible machine, which tries to detect the particles of the universe to see what it's all built from. And they've made some incredible discoveries there. And in order to analyze all the data coming out of these detectors, they need a lot of computers. So this is where Berners-Lee in the early 90s developed, or some would say invented, the World Wide Web. And these are pictures from the first web terminal that was made available. There's a lot of students at CERN, and in those days, not everyone had their own computer. So we put out the a public web terminal to show people what this web project was about. I should say that I joined Tim's team there in 1994. So I wasn't there from the very beginning. I'm not a physicist, but I came running when he published the web project, made it available on the internet. I downloaded the software they had and started running, and I saw this was incredible. So I came running to the project, and I was there when this terminal was set out. And I don't know really much about the pipes that you see on the left there. There's probably a lot of physics stuff going on there that I don't understand. But I know about this terminal, and there you can see the bulletin board next to it. It says World Wide Web. You click, we do the rest. This was kind of the marketing slogan for the World Wide Web project. And I think we can conclude now that it wasn't really the quality of the marketing slogan that made the World Wide Web succeed. That's a joke. You click, we do the rest isn't that great of a marketing slogan, but it still took off. The World Wide Web project took off incredibly, and you can see some of the graphs on in the picture to the left of the slogan there. This is sort of tracking how many servers there are and how many requests came in, and those graphs showed incredible growth. And of course today the World Wide Web has become a very important part of our lives. I don't think there's a single day where any of you in the audience don't use the web in some way, and that's the case for billions of people out there as well. So the man who did this was Tim Berners-Lee. You can see him here. He invented three things that we still use every day. He invented first the HTML language, which I'll say a little bit more about, and also the HTTP protocol, and then the concept of URLs, where you take, HTTP://. That's really Tim's invention, and I think we should be very thankful to him that he made this all available, and he insisted that CERN made it available for free as well, so that anyone can use it. He didn't patent it or copyright it or try to make money from it. He made it openly available. So if we take a look at HTML for a second, you all know HTML by heart. We have very simple tags. We have a start tag, we have the content of a tag, that's headline in this picture, and we have the ending tag, which has a little slash in it to mark that it's different from the start tag. And I can explain this to any person who has a basic understanding of a keyboard and a screen in about 30 seconds. It's very simple. It has a simple structure, but it has universal semantics. That is, the H1 here stands for headline. And HTML has a small vocabulary of these tags that are made for documents. So we have headlines, and we have paragraphs, and we have lists, etc. And these are semantic tags. They say something about the role of the content. They don't say anything about the presentation. It doesn't say anything about whether this headline should be presented on a screen or whether it should be read out loud in the car or in the shower. There are many ways to display HTML, and seeing them on screen is the most common, but not the only way. HTML is described in a specification. Like I said, Tim wanted this to be used by everyone. So a community formed around HTML, and they produced the HTML specifications. And we're now up to HTML5. So there's been a bit of a development since the beginning, but you can still find the very simple tags in there, and you can still write very simple HTML documents and still get incredible results from it. So my contribution to this was to come up with the concept of CSS. Because in the beginning, when people wrote HTML tags, they were very happy that they could do hypertext on a global scale. But it didn't really look that great after a while. So people wanted to say something about the presentation of their documents. They wanted to say something about fonts and colors. So I thought we should have a way for them to express that, because if we don't give them that way of expressing it, then maybe they'll do something which is worse. Maybe they'll come up with a new language, or maybe they'll start using images. I mean, the worst thing you can do is take a picture of text, like the fax machines. You remember the fax machines? Have you, some of you seen a fax machine? Yes, you have, I'm sure. And the fax machine, basically, I'm just now checking that you're still there. That's good. I'd like to hear you. The fax machine basically takes a picture of a document and sends that picture to the other sides where it's printed. And that was incredible when it came out. And it's done amazing things, but it's really stupid because you cannot do anything with the document in the other end. You can read it if you're a human, but you can't search it, you can't index it, you can't increase the font size, you can not manipulate the document in any way. It becomes a dead document. We wanted the World Wide Web to be alive, and we wanted people to use HTML. So instead of telling them to only use the semantic tags, don't worry about the presentation, CSS took the approach of, we will let you say what you think about the presentation. We want you to present documents in a beautiful way, like you want them to be. But on the other hand, we also want the documents to be semantic. We want there to be HTML semantics in there. And we want the users in the other end to also be able to say something about the presentation. So we have a concept of user style sheets where you can, for example, increase the font size if you need that to see. So just like HTML, CSS is very simple. It is presentational. It very much says something about the presentation, and here I'm saying something about the visual presentation. I'm not saying something about the volume or the voice for oral presentation. I am talking about a screen or even perhaps a paper. But you can tie CSS to the presentation media of your choice. You can say that this applies to the screen or this applies to print. And just like HTML, CSS is an open standard. We certainly want all the web technical foundations to be open, and therefore we have an organization, the World Wide Web Consortium, which organizes these specifications and makes sure they're open. And we have also had some other organizations contributing recently, like the What Working Group, who's working on HTML5. So HTML and CSS together, they have a relationship like brothers and sisters. One does one thing and one does the other, but they're very close to each other. They know each other well. And here you can see, and I'm sure you all know this, that you tie the name of the element and the name of the selector here, ties these things together and make sure you can display HTML documents along with CSS. So just to take you back to what web pages looked like in the beginning, this is a screenshots from around 1994, 1995, when Mosaic had come out. Mosaic was an incredible browser, and it really opened the eyes of many people who hadn't seen the web before. And the fact that you could display a document in front of you, and then you could have this link, and you could click on the link, and you could be taken to a document from anywhere else in the world, was just mind-boggling at the time. You remember, this was how most people came to the internet. They hadn't used the internet before. And the looks of it, people didn't really care about the looks of it. The look of this web page here is set by the browser. These are preferences in the Mosaic browser that says that the background should be gray and that the link should be blue. This was the default choice, and most people saw it that way. When designers started to come along to the web, they wanted something more. They came from a desktop publishing background. They had Apple computers, so they had laser printers, they had lots of fonts and stuff, and they wanted to take those along. So instead of telling them go away, CSS tried to show them that yes, you can express beauty on the web as well. Now I'm going to take a little detour, and I'm going to tell you about a project I was involved in 1994. It was a project to put the laws of Norway on the web. I'm Norwegian, so I was involved with this discussion with people. We wanted to have something interesting on the web, and we thought, what kind of content should we put on? And we thought, legal documents, laws should be there, because laws, they're created by the government, they're created by the parliament, the politicians that we elect, and we want those laws to be made available for free to everyone, because we pay taxes, so we paid for the creation of this, and then we should also have them back. And at the time, you could have electronics access to laws in Norway, actually. They had typed them in, and they had made them available, but the service was mostly for lawyers who had to pay like 50 euros per month to get access. And for a lawyer, that's a bargain. That's incredible to be able to search through laws and legal documents. But for normal citizens, you don't really want to pay 50 euros per month to be able to read laws. That's just an insult, really. So some of us started to type in laws and to scan laws and made them available. Laws in Norway, at least, aren't copyrighted, so we could do that. We could do that legally, but there was a question about whether the notes inside some of these laws, for example, one note could say, this law of 1986 replaces this other law of 1964. That's kind of meta information, which some people said, it's copyrighted, we own it. And therefore, they said, you can't put it on the web. So since I was sitting in Switzerland, which is kind of neutral and away from the Norwegian police, I was given the task of publishing this on the web. So I actually put all the laws we had scanned and typed in on CERN's computer and made them available from there. But I had to be honest, I didn't discuss this with the CERN management first. And I didn't even tell Tim, who was my boss, and I was sharing office with him. But we did get some publicity on this. This is an article in Norwegian. You cannot read this language probably, but I've translated one small part of it, and I will read it to you. An anarchistic group of 20 volunteers tries to replace Lovdata. That was the pay-for service. The group is publishing the laws of Norway from a computer in Switzerland. From there, the laws are freely available via the world's largest computer network, the internet. And this was actually the first time the word internet was used in Aftenposten, which is the main daily in Oslo. So this was a new area for them as well. I'm not sure the journalist got it all the way right. He called us an anarchistic group. I mean, we were putting the laws of Norway on the web, so I'm not sure we were very anarchistic, really. That's a joke, yes. I heard some of you laugh, great. But anyway, one evening when I was working on this, Tim comes by, he walks and he sees my screen and he asks me, Håkon, what are you doing? And I get a little nervous because I haven't told him about this, and I certainly haven't, asked for permission to use CERN servers for this purpose. So, but I'm an honest person. I had to tell him, I'm, making the laws of Norway available from CERN servers. And he looks at me, and then he asks me, do you need more disk space? So he was very much in favor of using the technology to change things. He didn't give me any sort of problems. He encouraged me. He offered me more disk space to make this happen. And I'm very happy that Tim continues to be a very important part of the community in making sure that the technology is used as open as possible by as many people as possible. Now I'll continue with a little bit of CSS history, going through some of the properties that you can apply to text here. And font size is a natural place to start, where if you want to set a certain font size, you write the code. Up here you see the code. Again, this is elementary for you, setting this italic, setting serif, setting the background. Some people had a little bit of problems with the RGB notation here, but you know, if you're a smart person, can learn this in about 2 minutes still. You can set a border around things. You can even set a color to the border. And I tell you, you know, in 1996, this was quite incredible if you came from an HTML background to be able to do borders and such around text. So things have changed a bit over the years. Border style also very hot in 1996. Setting insets and outsets, very popular. Text shadows was quite ambitious, actually. We wanted to have something in there to avoid people replicating text, putting in an element twice and then positioning it with negative margins or such. That kind of works, but it doesn't really work. And you send over twice the amount of text you need, and you may confuse the search engines, and certainly you confuse the readers if you have a sort of an audio presentation. Synthetic speech will read this twice. So we wanted to have a way of doing text shadows, which was a very common effect, and still is a very common effect, of course. So we made this text shadow property. It hasn't been used so much until now because it wasn't implemented in the early browsers. Internet Explorer, for example, didn't implement this, so it was sort of left behind in the shadow, so to say. But it's now with us still. That's good to see, and you can do incredible things with it. Just, you know, the first example here, I just set 10 pixel, 10 pixel. That's an XY offset, and then a color, and then you add one more size parameter here, and you can make sort of this fuzzy look, and you can set the color of the shadow. So just by changing, I think one principle we had is we wanted, just by changing a one-liner, adding one parameter, you can do a whole lot. We didn't want CSS to be a programming language where you had to have programming background or learn a lot of computer stuff. Pretty much we wanted people to be able to see the properties and the values, and after a little bit of an explanation, be able to change this. And I'm sure anyone in this room would know how to change the color of that shadow just by looking at this code. And in 30 seconds, you would have had it to your favorite shadow. And then for the slightly more advanced cases, we can do quite advanced effects. Here's kind of like this spray paint effect. It's still the text that sits behind here, but by setting the color of the text to be the same as the document background, and by setting these other parameters here, you can sort of get the outline of the text. So we need to give people a little bit of, you know, effects. The toolbox has to be filled with something that can do a splash on the screen. But that was not really why we did CSS. CSS was invented in order to save HTML, so that we didn't turn the web into a fax machine, or we didn't start sending PostScript or PDF around, because we don't want that to happen. We want the web to be open, simple, and semantic. And of course, this has continued on. CSS took off, was implemented by many browsers. Personally, I've been working with one of them since 1999. That's when I joined Opera Software back in Oslo. I knew the guys from before. I didn't really think they could do a browser in Norway. I thought there's no, you know, culture for software in Norway. Software, that's something the Americans can do, and none of us can really compete with Mosaic, I said. That was before I left for CERN. But these guys were stubborn, and they started to make a browser. And when I found that Opera had implemented CSS much better than any of the other browsers, and the other browsers were Netscape and Internet Explorer at the time, but that's when I thought, wow, they can do it. Even in Norway, they can make software. So that's when I came back to Norway, and I've been working for Opera since, working on standardization and also collaborating with other browser vendors. So making CSS move forward has been an important part of my life for the last 20 years. And one of the things that has come in CSS3 is border radius. I must say, I was against border radius because some people suggested this early on, that we should have this border radius thing, and it's quite simple, as you can see from the code up there. You know, you immediately understand how this works. But I thought, you know, nobody would really want that kind of design anymore. That's sort of what they did in the 90s, 70s. Do we really want to go back to that kind of aesthetics? I thought, you know, this was a bygone area, but it appears I'm wrong there. It appears people really want these rounded borders, so I had to give up. That's part of the group thinking, you know. Sometimes you had to give in and accept that things don't go your way. And I'm actually now very happy that border radius is there. So you can do some incredible things with it just by setting a different parameter for the vertical versus horizontal axis. You can change the look of it, and again, you know, introducing a little slash in here. It's not totally intuitive why the slash matters in this code, but given, you know, if you compare these, then you see that, you know, you kind of get it if you followed me so far. So this is really just visual fluff. It's not important at all what the border look like, and I doubt that any of the search engines will care what the border around an element is. But for humans, it's very important. I mean, our eyes are very sensitive to these kinds of things, and it's part of doing web design. You want to create that special look so that you identify visually a site to distinguish it from others. So then you need these kinds of tools in your toolbox. Another thing that CSS was very important for CSS was fonts. In the beginning, we had some fonts. It wasn't like there was none fonts available. Microsoft actually sponsored this by making their core fonts, which is their name for it. They made their core fonts available for anyone to use. These were originally designed for use with Windows, and it shipped with Windows starting from 1995 around about. And they're very good fonts. Microsoft put a lot of money and efforts into making them, and by making them available for anyone to use, even if you're on a Mac or a Linux system, that made it possible to distribute these fonts and make use of them in CSS. But they had to be available on the machine. You actually had to install this on your Linux or Windows machine in order for them to be available for the web page. And that kind of works. We can sort of, distribute these fonts, these 10 fonts we could distribute. But when there are many fonts, many designers who want to make new fonts, and there are many languages outside of the Western world where you need other characters. Minsk, of course, is one such example. The Cyrillic is quite manageable. You don't have that many letters in the alphabet. But if you go to China or Japan or Korea or many other places, you don't have a wide selection of fonts available. So that's another reason for doing fonts on the web. So again, the code for using fonts in CSS is quite simple. What I do here is that I import a style sheet from somewhere, which is an index of fonts that this incredible designer, Steffman, has made. And he's made them available for anyone to use. And then I just set the font family to be the name of one of his fonts. And then suddenly my font is using a very different presentation. So just, again, a one-liner is able to change many things. And there are thousands of these fonts that are available for free. some of them are very much in the kind of decorative space. I wouldn't recommend using the Cardiff font in your next CV. You don't really want to read an article, a newspaper article in Cardiff font, but it could work for a headline, or it could work for a birthday invitation or something special. And then I mentioned this about the other languages, and I was very happy when in 2011 this message was sent out on the Wikimedia mailing lists, where they reported on the web fonts deployment. On Monday, December 12, we deployed the extension web fonts to 40 wikis in 11 Indic languages. And then they go on to list the languages. So they've actually, through Wikipedia, they can now display Wikipedia in the native language in all these Indic fonts. And I'm not a specialist on these fonts or these languages, so I don't know how well served they were before. I suspect that Microsoft, for example, didn't prioritize maybe all of these Indic languages. Although I shouldn't really blame Microsoft. It's not really a Microsoft issue here. Microsoft has done the right thing by making the fonts available, but even the best font designers cannot cover every language because you basically don't have the skills of making those fonts. But now it's possible for local people to make fonts, make them available, and use them in Wikipedia. So once you download the web page, if the font is not installed in your computer, it will look like this. You will have these squares that just indicates that there is some text here, but I don't have the fonts to display them. And in the next second or so, depending on your bandwidth, then you will download the font and you will see the page being rendered. So, so web fonts doesn't solve all problems, of course. The problem of bandwidth is still there. In many of these places, bandwidth is scarce, and you maybe even pay money to download the font. So it's not a sort of once-for-all solution, but it takes us a lot further. It shows that, presentation isn't just about aesthetics and wow factors. It's actually about making sure that the human reader can see this in a compelling manner. Switch topic. I'm going to go on to testing, and I know my time is kind of running out, so I'm going to be quick here. Testing has been very important. We needed to do a lot of testing in the beginning. Browsers render things differently. Here's a simple example. Early on, there was a community forming around this, the Web Standards Project. And through the Web Standards Project, some of us published a test for browsers. We actually published this when Microsoft announced that they would do IE7. IE7 was kind of long awaited. There was a long time when IE6 was there. We still see a lot of IE6 users with us. But when there were so many problems in IE6 that we sat down and decided to write a test to try fix the problems, to kind of help Microsoft fix the problems so that when they did IE7, it would look much better. And then we found out that it wasn't just Microsoft. It was all the browser vendors had problems, including Opera, including Mozilla. So we designed a test that would look bad in all browsers. But I had to say it looked worse in IE. This is what it looks like in IE6. And here's what it should look like. A smiley face, which we can all recognize. This, on the other hand, is quite terrible. It's very bloody face. You can kind of see that it has eyes, nose is gone, and there's something dripping from the mouth here. Really nasty stuff. And then IE7 came along, and we had high hopes, and this is what it looked like. And we were very disappointed because the eyes were there still, but we couldn't really say whether this is a nose or something under the eye. And the dripping had turned into really, really nasty stuff. So we were very, is this ever going to work? Are we ever going to get interoperable renderings from CSS? And then the fantastic magical thing happened that IE8 came along, and it looked Great. They had fixed all the problems. And somebody inside Microsoft must have, said, we just had to fix this thing because every time I'm at a conference, people ask me, when are you going to support the acid test? And then they just sat down and did it. And the world became a better place after that. And all the other browsers fixed their problems too. So today, it's actually quite usable. We can actually use CSS. If we forget about the IE6 users, we can use CSS interoperably. That wasn't the case 10 or 15 years ago. So things have improved. I'm going to skip a little bit ahead. I'm going to talk a little about what are the threats to the webs. Apps. Have you heard of apps? That's a joke. That's a joke. Actually, on phones, people spend more times on apps, typically around 80% of their time in apps and 20% surfing in their web browser. I think that's a threat in one way because most of the apps are native and they're tied to one system. They're tied to either Apple or Google, and we don't want the web to be that way. We want things to be developed independently of companies. We don't want to know how long these companies will be around or how their user restrictions will be. So I think it's a threat. We need to make sure we can do the things we want to do in web technologies, and we can make apps in web. We can make web apps too, which would work on any system, which is a good thing. One thing that I've been seeing is that many of the apps use rendering which we cannot do in HTML. For example, this electronic book, which is sold as an app, has a multi-column rendition, and Facebook released a paper app recently, and we can't do this in CSS yet. But I have a proposal. I've been working on the multi-column layout, and I've also been working on page design. So I'm going to give you a demonstration, a quick demonstration of what is possible to do in the future, in a forthcoming version of the specification. Just bear with me here 1 second. Take a look at this newspaper article. Take a look at the design. This was kind of the first newspaper clipping I found when I searched for a multi-column text, but it's quite interesting with the heading there, with the animals and the way things are spaced out by the typographer, by the designer. We're going to work our way towards that design. We're going to start with a simple web page here, which I'm showing in this special build of Opera, where we just start out with a normal HTML document, which has a scroll bar on the right-hand side when the text is too long. And then I start using multicol, and I can make things go into 2 columns here, but I still have the scroll bar, and now I had to actually scroll up and down in order to read the text. So that's not ideal, but making the lines shorter is a good thing. And actually making the lines based on the ideal length of the line is even better. Instead of saying 2 columns, I here say that the column should be roughly 14 ems wide, so that this will change when I resize the window. You see that the number of columns actually change dynamically. So that's a good thing, but I still have the scroll bar on the right-hand side, and I move on to the next one. Now the scroll bar is gone. What I did here was to use a proposed extension in CSS3 to say that the overflows should go to the next page. So now there's actually no scroll bar, but I can go to the next page by using a gesture if I'm on a tablet, by using page up and down if I'm on a desktop computer. So the introduction of paging, I think, is very important. If you go back to the way Romans showed text, they started out with scrolls. This we also know from the Jewish culture, of course, the Bible. They still use Torah, these scrolls, while publishing since 2,000 years has mostly been done on paper, where you actually cut and have discrete pages. And I want those pages to make it into web designs as well, because I see them in apps. I think they're very, very, very good. Okay, let's move on. Now I still have my page here and I still have my columns, but but I've actually added column spanning so that the image here spans 2 columns, and I floated things to the top corner. So the image moves from one place in the document where it's anchored in the beginning, and it goes over to the side there. And then I can add more images here, and I can add even more images. And let's see, here I say column span all. Actually, this is now the heading here is now spanning all, so I'm stretching all across, whereas here I'm stretching 2 columns. This little image in the lower left, 2 columns, and here it's 3 columns. And I'm going to do more. I'm going to introduce more images and more text, and these, I said these should go to the bottom. They shouldn't be floating to the top corner, or the bottom corner. Yeah. The lower left here is in the corner. These are just setting, not I don't specify corner. I just specify bottom. This is still in the works, kind of. But I hope you see where we are when you look at the cat article, and you can see that this has a lot of cat pictures. And here at the bottom, you see a picture of me with my sheep. So we have better animals in this new specification. That's great. Okay, and we can do something more. We can do something that the newspaper man couldn't do, because he did a fixed design, right? He made it for paper and was printed once. We don't know what it would look like if he resized his newspaper. But what we can do here, we can resize this design, and you will see that things here push around a little bit when we change the size, and images jump a little. So this is not something that the user would do, but even anywhere here, things look just about, it looks okay actually. Both the first and the second page look okay, and this means that users of different devices will have an okay presentation. If you have a wide desktop computer, you will see something reasonable. If you have a smaller tablet, you will see something reasonable. And as we move down, you actually come down to a one column layout where things still look quite reasonable. So having the thing be dynamic, be scalable, and still work has been the goal here. So I hope that more browsers will implement this. I think it's an important part of visual presentations of newspaper articles and other things that people use in apps today. And I also think, if we look at this in perspective, we've had printing for mechanical printing has been around for just about 500 years, and we've been making books as Gutenberg changed the landscape there. He started making books, make them easily available, let us spread the information, and the printing press had incredible influence on history in the West, especially, where we had the Reformation. The Reformation would not have happened without books being available. We had the Renaissance, which was helped by distributing texts. Later on, we had the Industrial Revolution. It would not have been possible without being able to distribute information inexpensively to a lot of people. And the web today is the Gutenberg invention, except we're not just changing Western culture now, we're also changing the whole world. The web is available all over the world. And it's changing. In the past 20 years, it has changed us more than we like to think, perhaps. So we need to make sure we can display things, display documents, do apps, do them on screen, but also not forget the paper. I'm very sentimental about paper, and I want to continue to make paper books. I also think Gutenberg's story tells us something. He tells us that inventions can last a very long time. So this beautiful Bible that he printed 500 years ago, if we had one in front of us now, we could still use it. We would know how that book works. We know how to fold the page. We would probably need to wear gloves in order to fold one of his Bibles, but the user interface, it's still the same. So when people ask me how long this web thing will last, I give them an answer of 500 years. And that's not a random number. It's a number I get from Gutenberg, because the things he did 500 years ago is still with us today. So I think actually the web pages that we write today, the code that the CSS and HTML and JavaScript code that you write this year will be readable on computers 500 years from now. Perfect. Perfect. Okay. Thank you. I'm glad to hear you applauding. I may have run a little bit over time. Do we still have time for some questions, Julia?
Yeah, thank you, Hakon. Unfortunately, we've run out of time for questions. Well, but I do have one since I'm holding the mic, so I have the privilege. Well, yeah, sorry, guys. I'm being a huge troll here, but could you share us your opinion on the recently released Vivaldi browser?
I'm sorry, I hear somebody speaking, but I can't hear the...
Oh, that must be me.
I can't hear you. Okay.
Do you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay. So I was mentioning that I'm a huge troll, but I really have to ask you your opinion towards the Vivaldi browser. You know, the one that has been released 4 days ago or so.
Vivaldi?
Yes.
Has Vivaldi reached Minsk?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it has.
It has. Okay, that's good. You know, Vivaldi is made by Jon von Tetzschner, who took me into opera in 1999. And he's a very stubborn person who wants to make the best browser available. And I think I've been trying Vivaldi myself, and there are things in Vivaldi that I really, really like. Most of the things in Vivaldi that I like came from opera. So we've had them in opera, and maybe not all of them are in opera anymore. So there's probably some things in Vivaldi that I'd like to bring back into opera. I think that's the way we had to do things on the web. We had to look at each other. Many of the opera inventions, like for example, speed dial and tabbed browsing, has been,
right.
I can't use the word stolen because I think it's a good thing. They have been borrowed by others, which is a good thing. So maybe we'll borrow some things from Vivaldi as well.
Oh, it's great to hear that. Okay, thank you.
So can I ask you, if you have tried it, do you like it?
Yeah, I'm afraid so. I'm afraid I liked it. I like it better than the classic opera because it reminds me of the opera back then, before it let go of Presto engine. You know, so I'm a bit nostalgic about that. But
I think
it's just my opinion, of course.
We all have some sentimentality. I also have actually Presto running on my computer still. It's good to have, and I like books. Do you like books in Minsk?
Yeah, sure we do.
That's good. That's good.
Okay, thank you. Have a nice and safe and short trip back home. It was excellent to have you here. Окей. Нет, к сожалению, нет времени на вопросы. Но наши следующие докладчики, они все гораздо ближе, чем Hakon к нам. Поэтому их можно будет потом поймать в коридорах, даже если у вас не будет времени задать вопрос после их доклада. И наш следующий докладчик — это Аксель Раушмайер. И, наверное, никто не пишет про ECMAScript 6, или стоит говорить ECMAScript 2015, больше, чем Аксель, чаще, чем Аксель, и лучше, чем Аксель. На самом деле он успевает написать статью за день, опубликовать ее, и в этот же день она попадает в дайджест Web Platform Daily, где потом ее читают тысячи человек. И сегодня он здесь у нас, и он будет рассказывать про ECMAScript 6 или ECMAScript 2015.